Hello, you are most welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Real Impartation Movement on Tuesday Night Anatomy with Daniel Okwan. Today's section, I run with you the pharyngeal arches. And these pharyngeal arches can also be called bronchial arches. These pharyngeal arches will be relevant as far as development of important structures in the head and neck areas are concerned. And so, without much ado, let's set the ball rolling. So there we are. Now this is the developing embryo. So we've taken a cross section of it. This is the prosencephalon. It tells you the forebrain will be developing over here. And then of course tells you that there's the cranial region. So from the head, yes, as you go this way, we are going to the tail region, caudal region. But I'm interested in just this area. Now, so at this point in the head and neck area, you can see this ball-like condensation. Okay, these structures over here. These structures over here, you can see they are bilateral, they are paired. These are what we call pharyngeal arches. Pharyngeal arches. Now, actually, we get to know that, yes, we used to have 6 pharyngeal arches, but of course, one degenerates so that we have only 5 pharyngeal arches, excluding 5th pharyngeal arch. So that is what we see. So schematically, what do we have? Now, these arches, okay, what happens is that, yes, all the 3 germ layers will contribute to it, such that from the outside, okay, laterally, we have what we call the ectoderm. So ectoderm will form the lateral portion or from the outside. Okay, so all these areas we can see that is ectodermal. Then from the inside, yes, or medially, they will be covered with endoderm. Okay, this way. So, but what we find is that in between them, yes, you have, of course, the mesoderm. So if I have just one of these ones, there's one pharyngeal arch, this is another, this is another. So in this schematic diagram, you can see 3 pharyngeal arches. Okay. Now what happens is that at one point, as I'm moving from one pharyngeal arch to the next, what happens is that the ectoderm and the endoderm, they come very close together. So this constricted area, okay, having mainly formed by, of course, endoderm from the medial aspect, and then ectoderm is, laterally, is what we call pharyngeal membrane. Pharyngeal membrane. Now, the constricted area of the ectoderm is what we call pharyngeal clefts. It gives rise to this clefts. So anytime you hear clefts, then it is ectodermal. While, of course, the area which the endoderm, okay, becomes very close to the ectoderm, okay, or that inward projection is what we call the pouch. So this is pharyngeal pouch. So we have pharyngeal clefts and pouch. So if you talk about pouch, it is endodermal. Okay, so this, we have. So one thing that we are talking about, we said we are going to have 6 pharyngeal arches, of which the 5th one disappears, so that eventually we have what we call 5 pharyngeal arches. And these are, yes, we have one first pharyngeal arch. Remember, they are paired. So one over here, second, third, 4th, and then 6th. We don't have the 5th because the 5th one disappears, and there will be a remnant form which we call ultimobranchial body. We will see that one. Then I said that, yes, all the 3 germ layers are contributing to it. So from the outside, externally, yes, we are going to have the ectodermal structure. Yes, so all this area will be ectodermal. Okay, outside, ectodermal. Okay, all the outside will be ectodermal. Then from the inside, they will be covered with, endoderm. Okay, inner portion will be covered with endoderm, except the first pharyngeal arch. So for the first pharyngeal arch, for both sides, they will be covered with ectodermal structure. So please get to know that distinction. That's from the outside, laterally, pharyngeal arches are covered with ectoderm, except, okay, the first pharyngeal arch, which of course in both areas, okay, both laterally and medially, they are covered with ectoderm. But of course, the remaining portions will be covered with, of course, endoderm. But what we are going to see is that I told you that there's that constriction which if I'm moving from one pharyngeal arch to the next, the constriction from the lateral aspect, okay, is called, or that space over there will be called, where of course the ectoderm comes very close to the endoderm, you form what we call the cleft. And then where it is the endodermal, we form pouch. So let's see how many. We've seen that we have 5 definitive pharyngeal arches, excluding the 5th one. Then let's see for the clefts. For the clefts, yes, between the first pharyngeal arch and second, we are going to have the first cleft. Between the second and third, we are going to have the second cleft. Between third and fourth pharyngeal arches, we are going to have the fourth cleft. And of course, between fourth and sixth, not fifth, fourth and sixth pharyngeal arches, we are going to have the fourth cleft. Okay, so please get to know that. And clefts are ectodermal, laterally placed. Then if I'm moving from if I go to the endodermal portion, between, of course, I've said endodermal portion will be called pouches. So between the first and second pharyngeal arches, we have the first pouch. Between, of course, the second and then the third pharyngeal arches, we have, of course, the second pouch. Between the third and then, of course, the fourth, we have the third pouch. And then, of course, between the fourth and the sixth pharyngeal arches, we are going to have, of course, the fourth pouch. Then, of course, I told you that there will be remnant of the 5th pouch, which we call the ultimobranchial body. And that ultimobranchial body, you will see it, what it does. Okay? So that is what I want you to actually know over here. And then we go to now. So we've seen that these pharyngeal apparatus, or these pharyngeal arches, yeah, they will have ectodermal portion from the lateral aspect. They will have endodermal portion from the inner aspect. Then, of course, they will also have, what we call in between, they will have the mesodermal portion. So what is the fate of this kind of, pharyngeal clefts? So ectodermal, we have the clefts. What is their fate? Now, the first, if you look at your head and neck area, you see there's only one opening. That's the external auditory meatus, or the external auditory canal. Okay, and that external auditory meatus will be developing from, of course, the first pharyngeal cleft. Okay, then apart from that, it also gives rise to the outer layer of the tympanic membrane. Outer layer of the tympanic membrane. Now, what we find is that the remaining clefts obliterate. Why? Because there will be downward growth. Okay, growth caudally of what we call the second pharyngeal arch. So it grows downwards, and then, of course, it covers the remaining clefts. Otherwise, you'll be seeing this kind of, clefts all over in the neck region, okay? But there's no any other cleft again, because they are covered, and there's no any ball-like condensations over there, because all these things will be covered by the downward growth of the first pharyngeal arch, okay? And that one creates a space. There will be a space trapped over there, and that space, because in the neck region, we call it cervical sinus. Cervical sinus. This cervical sinus, of course, will ultimately degenerate, okay, and therefore all these other clefts will not give rise to any other structure in mammals. However, persistence of this cervical sinus in some individuals may lead to what we call branchial cysts. Branchial cysts. So please get to know that. So schematically, what are we saying? We have from the ectodermal region, we have this cleft over here. This is the first pharyngeal cleft, which will give rise to the external auditory meatus, together with, of course, the outer layer of the tympanic membrane. But we're saying that the second pharyngeal arch will begin to grow downwards. It grows downwards so that it covers all these ball-like condensation together with their clefts over here. So that if you touch your neck area, there's no ball-like condensations. There are no clefts anyway over there. And when it grows downwards, it traps this space where it's trapped over here in the neck region. It's called cervical sinus, which get degenerated or it obliterates, except in those individuals which will persist, forming what we call branchial cysts. So if you've seen the pharyngeal clefts, how about the pouches? And we said the pouches are endodermal. Pouches are also 4, yes, and then you add the ultimobranchial body to it. So if you look at it from the first pharyngeal arch, so if these are the pharyngeal, pharyngeal arches, yeah, between the first, okay, so the first pharyngeal arch, between the first pharyngeal arch and of course the second pharyngeal arch, we get the first pouch. And this first pouch, yes, now if you look at it from externally, we said that the first cleft, okay, will give rise to external auditory meatus together with, of course, the outer layer of the tympanic membrane. Therefore, it tells you that this first pouch will give rise to, of course, the inner layer of tympanic membrane. Okay, then apart from that, it will also give rise to the middle ear cavity, the mastoid antrum, as well as, of course, the eustachian tube or the auditory tube, which otherwise you also call the pharyngotympanic, tube. So please get to know that. So that's coming from, of course, the first, pouch. Now, how about the second pouch? We said the second pouch is between the second and, of course, third pharyngeal arches. Okay, that one will give rise mainly to the, of course, the lining epithelium of the palatine tonsil, Then, of course, the third pouch, yes, the third pouch will give rise to, of course, what we call the thymus and, of course, the inferior parathyroid gland. Now, the thymus, the growth of what we call the third pouch, yes, is going to have what we call ventral wing and then, of course, dorsal wing. It is the ventral wing that gives rise to, of course, the thymus, while, of course, the dorsal wing will give rise to, of course, the inferior parathyroid gland. Then when you go to the fourth pouch, we will get, the formation of what? Superior parathyroid gland. Now remember, rather the fourth, pouch is giving rise to the superior, while, of course, the third pouch, okay, in both cases, the dorsal wings is giving rise to, of course, the inferior parathyroid gland. So the surprising thing is, why is it so? But one thing that we will get to know is that there will be downward growth. So I want to explain that one to you now. And then, of course, we said I will explain the ultimobranchial body to you. So let me explain this concept. Why is it that the third pharyngeal arch, third pouch, is rather giving rise to, of course, thymus together with, of course, inferior parathyroid gland. So as I told you, the dorsal wing, okay, will give rise to the inferior parathyroid gland, while the ventral wing will give rise to the thymus. Okay, now both of them, they will detach themselves, okay, from the wall of the pharynx. Okay, and then, of course, the thymus will migrate thymus is eventually going to the superior, going to anterior mediastinum, so to speak. But as it moves, it will be pulling, as it moves, inferomedially, it will be pulling along what we call the inferior parathyroid gland. So that eventually, what we will find is that the inferior parathyroid gland will come below the superior parathyroid gland. So what are we saying? Yes, the dorsal wing of the fourth pharyngeal pouch, yes, is giving rise to superior parathyroid gland. It will also detach from the wall of the pharynx, okay, and, of course, migrate caudally, okay, with, of course, the thyroid gland. This time with the thyroid gland, not with the thymus. Okay, then, of course, it locates its position superiorly, where, of course, because of migration of what we call the thymus together with the inferior parathyroid gland, the inferior parathyroid gland now will come below. So please get to know that. Now, one thing that I have to also explain to you here is that we said we are going to have remnants of the fifth pouch. Now, the remnant of the fifth pouch is what we call ultimobranchial body. Now, we've read that ultimobranchial body, yes, in old literature, that yes, it gives rise to parafollicular, C cells or calcitonin producing cells. No. Now, current research has shown that no, it is not the ultimobranchial body that gives rise to, of course, the parafollicular or the C cells of the thymus. No. It is rather some cells, we call them neural crest cells, okay, which often refer to it as the fourth germ layer, which migrates. Some of those cells will migrate into our ultimobranchial body, and, of course, eventually will give rise to, of course, the calcitonin producing cells, the parafollicular C cells. So please get to know that. Then I told you that the fourth pouch is giving rise to, of course, superior parathyroid gland. Now, these two areas, the fourth pouch together with, of course, ultimobranchial body, is often referred to as the caudal branchial complex, or something we call caudal pharyngeal complex. Remember that branchial and pharyngeal, are synonymous. So please get to know that. Now, although I'm talking about the parafollicular C cells coming indirectly from ultimobranchial body, what I want you to know is that the thyroid gland is never derived from pharyngeal pouches. Okay, but this thyroid gland starts as a single thickening, okay, what you call a foramen cecum. When you look at the tongue, you look at the, where this foramen cecum, yes, was. And then we say that, yes, this foramen cecum will actually elongate caudally to form what they call the thyroid diverticulum. And this thyroid diverticulum would, of course, expand, and then, of course, bifurcate to form this kind of thyroid gland. Okay, so thyroid gland is actually coming from this thyroid diverticulum, which eventually starts as a single thickening or placoid called foramen cecum. Okay, it's never having anything to do with the bronchial arch. Bronchial pouches. So one thing that I want you to know is that the developing gland, yes, will remain transiently attached to the site of origin. Okay, so for instance, that is why we will see that this foramen cecum, yes, that space will be created, and there will be a connecting link to this final destination via this kind of thyroglossal duct. So the thyroid gland will migrate through this thyroglossal duct, okay, to get to, of course, the anterior aspect of the neck region. Okay, but some individuals, once the migration is complete, this thyroglossal duct should degenerate. Some individuals, it may persist to form, of course, a cyst. So if you've seen this kind of, the clefts and, of course, the pouches, let's go to the mesodermal portion, the most important aspect. So the mesoderm of these pharyngeal, arches. So let's look at the first pharyngeal arch. Now remember that the first pharyngeal arch is also called mandibular arch. Now, it's not because it's going to be supplied by the mandibular nerve or the trigeminal nerve, no, but it is because it's going to contribute mainly to the formation of what we call the mandible. Okay, so the first pharyngeal arch is also called mandibular arch. And this mandibular arch, yes, it's able to, give rise to this kind of processes. I'll come to that. But there will be a cartilage model that develops, okay, in the first bronchial arch, and that is what we call Meckel's cartilage. Okay, now this Meckel's cartilage is not the one who is going to give rise to, of course, the mandible, the maxilla, the zygomatic bone, and then the squamous portion of the temporal bone. No, it's not going to give rise to them, because these bones will develop via intramembranous ossification. That is formation of bone from scratch using connective tissue mesenchyme. So it means that this first pharyngeal arch, okay, will give rise directly to these kind of processes, mandibular process to form, of course, the mandible, maxillary process to form the maxilla, which, of course, will give rise to, of course, the zygomatic bone, as well as even squamous portion of the temporal bone. Okay, so please get to know that. However, through endochondral ossification of the Meckel's cartilage, incus and malleus. So if you look at the ossicles of the ear, these ear ossicles, yes, these two of them will be coming from the first pharyngeal arch through endochondral ossification of the Meckel's cartilage. So these are the main things I want you to know. But of course, you can also know these ones, like the sphenomandibular ligament, as well as, of course, the anterior ligament of the malleus. They are still related to, of course, the malleus. Okay, so please get to know that. So let's go to the second pharyngeal arch. So the second pharyngeal arch is also given a name known as hyoid arch. Okay, not because of the hyoid artery that it is going to be supplied with, no, but because it's giving rise to some components of what we call these kind of arches. So that is what we see, component of the hyoid bone. Now, this one too, there's a cartilage model that develops, and that cartilage model is called Ricketts cartilage. So please get to know that it was left with one other bone of the ear ossicle, and that's the stapes. Now, this kind of stapes, the mist bones. So mist bones are the ear ossicles. The first MI will be coming from the first pharyngeal arch. The S will be coming from, of course, the second pharyngeal arch, and that's the stapes. Okay. And so that stapes will be developing, of course, from the Ricketts cartilage through endochondral ossification. But one thing that I want you to know is that, yes, we are talking about stapes except its foot process. So the foot process of stapes is not coming from the second pharyngeal arch, but it's coming from, of course, the aortic capsule, alongside its annular ligament. So please get to know that. Now, one other thing too that we get from the second pharyngeal arch is that there will be a process known as, of course, the styloid process. Okay, styloid process of what? Yes, talking about styloid process of the temporal bone to get off, of course. Now, because this one we said is also called hyoid arch. It means that most portion of the hyoid bone will be developing from it, the upper portion of the hyoid bone. So if you look at the hyoid bone, you can see that there will be, lesser cornua projecting from the upper part of the body of the hyoid. So these two, the lesser cornua, yes, it has to do with, the horns. So the lesser horns of the hyoid bone together, yes, so you see the lesser horns of the hyoid bone together, the upper body of the hyoid. They are both superior. They will also be coming from the second pharyngeal arch. So please get to know that. Then of course we said that ligament which will be connecting the stylo process to, of course, the lesser cornua, that's the stylohyoid ligament. So please get to know that. Together, of course, we said that we are going to have the stapes except its foot process, because its foot process together with, of course, the annular ligament will give rise to, of course, so it will be formed from the otic capsule. And I said that its cartilage model is called Ricketts cartilage. So now, we are through with the first and second pharyngeal arches, and they are given special names. Yes, namely, mandibular and, of course, hyoid arches. So it tells you now the remaining arches do not have special names, like the fourth and then the sixth arches. The third arch. Now the third arch will be giving rise mainly to the the lower body of the hyoid together with its greater cornua, the third pharyngeal arch. Okay, we said that the upper body as well as lesser cornua of the hyoid bone, okay, together with the hyoid ligament stylo process, and then of course we said that the stapes except its foot process will be coming from, of course, the second arch. Therefore the lower body together with, of course, the greater cornua, the greater cornua projects posteriorly, and they are inferior to, of course, the lesser cornua. So it means that those ones will be coming from, of course, the third pharyngeal arch. So please get to know that. Now for the fourth and then the sixth arches, they will be giving rise to the cartilages of the larynx, laryngeal cartilages. Yes, although some books will segregate them, but generally there's that kind of controversy regarding these ones. So just know that the fourth and then the sixth pharyngeal arches will give rise to, of course, the laryngeal cartilages of the larynx. So these are the arches, the mesoderm, what they are really giving rise to. So having seen these ones, then what is the nerve supply to each of these pharyngeal arches that we are talking about? So from so you can see that this is the fifth nerve, and the fifth nerve is known as the trigeminal nerve. It's actually the mandibular branch. Okay, I'm looking at the third division, the mandibular branch of the trigeminal nerve, which is going to supply this first pharyngeal arch. Now remember that the nerves that supply these pharyngeal arches, we refer to them as being post-traumatic nerves. Okay, so all the nerves, we see that they will have post-traumatic nerves, except the first pharyngeal arch, because the first pharyngeal arch, there will be a branch coming from the facial nerve, which we call it quadrant tympanic branch of the facial nerve, and that one is actually a pre-traumatic nerve. Okay, so the first pharyngeal arch, apart from having a post-traumatic nerve, being, of course, the mandibular nerve or mandibular branch of the trigeminal nerve, it is also having a pre-traumatic nerve by way of the quadrant tympani. So please get to know that. Then the second pharyngeal arch, yes, coming from, of course, the ponto, so coming from, of course, the pons and, of course, the pontomedullary junction, we are having this facial nerve, and this facial nerve, yes, is the nerve to, of course, the second pharyngeal arch. Now what am I trying to say? What I'm saying is that, for instance, if it's the mandibular nerve, then all muscles, all structures which will be supplied by, of course, the mandibular nerve will be developing eventually from the first pharyngeal arch. If I have any structure where it's also supplied, if it's a muscle where it's supplied, of course, by the facial nerve, then it means that it's also developing from, of course, the second pharyngeal arch. Now the third pharyngeal arch, its nerve supply from, of course, the medulla oblongata, yes, is coming from, of course, the glossopharyngeal nerve, cranial nerve 9. Okay, and then for the fourth and then the sixth arches, their nerve supply is coming from the vagus nerve. But you have to know which branch of the vagus nerve supply which one. So I mean this branch, which is the superior branch, okay, superior branch, which you call superior laryngeal branch of the vagus nerve, will be supplying the fourth, arch. And then of course for the sixth arch, it will be supplied by, of course, the recurrent laryngeal nerve. So please, this is what I want you to know, that the first pharyngeal arch is supplied by, of course, the mandibular branch of the trigeminal nerve. Okay, all these nerves are post-traumatic, but apart from that one, it will also be getting a pre-traumatic branch from, of course, the facial nerve, chorda tympani. Then the facial nerve, except chorda tympani, will be supplying the second arch, the third arch by glossopharyngeal nerve. Then of course the fourth and the sixth arch via vagus nerve, but the fourth one by the superior branch of the vagus nerve. Then the sixth arch by the recurrent branch of the vagus nerve. So please, that is what I want you to know. So having seen the nerve supply, how about the blood supply, the arterial supply of these pharyngeal arches? So for the arterial supply, for both the first pharyngeal arch, both right and left, yes, they will be supplied by, of course, the maxillary artery. Please get to know that. Then for the second pharyngeal arch, both left and right, they will be supplied by, of course, the stapedial artery. Okay, stapedial artery. But even apart from this, even hyoid artery will also contribute to it. Then when you go to the third arch, okay, the third arch, yes, will be supplied by, of course, the common carotid artery, as well as the roots of the internal carotid artery. Okay, common carotid artery as well as the root of the internal carotid artery, both left and right. Then for the fourth arch, okay, when you go to the left, is by the arch of aorta, but for the right, it is the right subclavian artery. So please get to know that. Now for the first up to the third, there's no difference, but the fourth, okay, instead of both are being supplied by the same artery, no, the left one is supplied by the arch of aorta, while of course the right one is supplied by the right subclavian artery. Similarly, if you go to the sixth arch is supplied, yes, on the right by the left pulmonary artery, as well as, of course, the ductus arteriosus, which eventually becomes ligamentum arteriosus. But of course, I'm looking at the left pulmonary artery for the left one, and then for the right, it is by, of course, the right pulmonary artery. So please get to know these kind of distinctions over here. So in summary, what have we seen? We've seen that we have five definitive pharyngeal arches, although there were 6. And these pharyngeal arches are pharyngeal arch 1, 2, 3, 4, and then of course 6. The fifth one, degenerates. And then the first 2 arches are given special names. So for instance, the first arch is called mandibular arch. The second arch is called hyoid arch. Similarly, with respect to cartilage model, it's only the first and second ones which are given special names. Okay, so for instance, the first one is called Meckel's cartilage, and then the second one is called Ricketts cartilage. Okay, and then we said that yes, with the derivatives, we are going to have, mainly we are going to, to form these structures. Let's say cartilage and of course bone, incus, malleus. Then of course with the bones, we talk about the mandible, we talk about the maxilla, talk about the zygomatic bone, talk about the squamous part of the temporal bone. All these ones will be coming from there. Then we said that the second pharyngeal arch, yes, will be giving rise to, of course, the stapes, except its full process. Okay, we said that. Then we said that yes, there will also be that kind of stylo process of the temporal bone. There will be stylohyoid ligaments, because that one is going to connect to, of course, the lesser corn one. Then we also have the upper body of the hyoid bone. All of them produced from the second arch. Then for the third arch, yes, you go to greater corn one, as well as the lower portion of the body of the hyoid. You know, that kind of series. So if you know the gross anatomy, you can really, think through and then make meaning out of these ones. Now for fourth and sixth arches, they will give rise to, of course, the laryngeal cartilages. Now importantly, this is what I want to stress here. Now the first arch, it means that any muscle where is supplied by, of course, the mandibular nerve will be developing from the first arch. So it means that this muscles of mastication, yes, talk about the masseter muscle, talk about the medial and lateral pterygoid, talk about the temporalis muscle, yes, all these ones will be coming, of course, from the first pharyngeal arch. But even apart from that, the muscles with the tensor attached to their names, like the tensor veli palatini and tensor tympani, they also be coming from the first arch. Then apart from that, these muscles which form, of course, the floor of the oral cavity, like, of course, the mylohyoid muscle, as well as the anterior belly of the digastric, muscle, yes, will also be coming from, of course, the first arch. Most of them are first arch. So please get to know that. Then, if you look at the second pharyngeal arch, yes, muscles of facial expression, yes, including even the posterior belly of including what we call the posterior belly of what we call the occipitofrontalis muscle, that's the occipitalis muscle. Talk about even the auricular muscles, okay? So that's the anterior, posterior, and of course superior auricular muscles. They are all there. Talk about even vaccinator muscle. They are all muscles of facial expression. Muscle, platysma muscle. Supplied by cervical portion of branch of what you call the facial nerve. Yes, all these ones will also be coming from there. Then apart from that, those muscles in the posterior aspects, like the posterior belly of digastric muscle, okay, will also be part of it. Of course, the stylohyoid muscle will also be part of it. Okay, so all these are muscles, which are supplied by, of course, the facial nerve. Then, if you go to the third pharyngeal arch, we said third pharyngeal arch is supplied by glossopharyngeal nerve, and that muscle only is the stylopharyngeal muscle. Now, get to know that this, stylopharyngeal muscle is a muscle of the pharynx, okay, but it's supplied exclusively by glossopharyngeal nerve. Therefore, we put it under the third, third, arch. It's a muscle of the third arch. Then, if you go to the fourth, okay, for the fourth, one thing that we said is that it's supplied by the superior, okay, laryngeal nerve. We mentioned that one. Supplied by, of course, the superior laryngeal nerve. And, this, and of course, superior laryngeal nerve divides into external and, of course, internal. The external, will actually give rise to, of course, this kind of cricothyroid, cricothyroid muscle. Okay, so it means that cricothyroid muscle is also even supplied by the fourth, it's a muscle of the fourth pharyngeal arch. But apart from that, this kind of muscles, okay, this kind of levator veli palatini. This time is levator veli palatini. Okay, levator veli palatini, yes, is also coming from, of course, the fourth arch. I didn't say tensor, I said levator veli palatini. So pharyngeal and extrinsic muscles, yes, all these ones will be coming from there. Then if you go to the sixth arch, yes, intrinsic muscles of what we call the larynx, but of course, except what we call the cricothyroid muscle. For cricothyroid muscle will be supplied, yes, from the external aspects, by the fourth arch, near to the fourth arch, okay, external laryngeal nerve. So that is what I want you to actually know over here. Yes, of course, we've seen the nerve supply to all these ones. And then, of course, we've also seen the arterial, supply. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you find this helpful. Okay, we'll be doing all these important aspects as far as the developmental anatomy is concerned. Yes, we'll be looking at development of the tongue, development of the face, the palate. Yes, all those ones. We look at, of course, systems, of course the GIT and what have you. Please share with friends, and may you have a good night.